to be joined by a good friend and comrade, a friend of the people, an author, decades-long organizer, Brother Musa T. Bay. What's up, brother?
Great intro, by the way. Great intro. Um, I'm great. I'm great. You know, just working. Uh,
Mm.
That's it. Excited to be here again. I feel like AIA is becoming like a second home.
Mm. Thank
We
you.
got to
I'm
get
glad
you.
to.
We got to get you on my show.
Voice of the People just dropped its first episode. And if everyone wants to look down in the description of this video, you can find a link to that. And you can look at that after we're live now, or if you want to pause it now and go to that and come back to this, however you want to do it. But it is down there, and I suggest folks check that out. Today
Yeah.
we're gathered because this Monday is Martin Luther King Day. It's a very special holiday for me and a lot of people. It means a lot. Looks like we lost Musa. Hopefully he comes back. Anyways, Monday is Martin Luther King Day, and we wanted to have a special show honoring King, his legacy, the civil rights struggle, the larger struggle for freedom of all people. And hopefully Musa comes back. We actually were trying to get his co-host as well. Here we go. He's back on. All right, you're back.
I don't know what just happened.
I lost you for a minute there. I was talking about we're celebrating Martin Luther King Day, which is Monday, and we wanted to have a discussion around King, around the holiday, as well as a broader discussion on, Black radicalism, Black liberation, and how that relates to the struggle for all working people. So, Brother Musa, maybe you could talk a little bit on King, Martin Luther King Day, and some of your experiences around it.
Well, so Dr. King's official birthday. Um, his birthday's coming up, and they of course made it a national holiday. It's funny that one of the last states to ratify his birthday as a national holiday, recognize it as a federal, is Arizona, which is funny. So usually on Dr. King's birthday, it's usually a day of service. So I usually kind of do other things more than what I usually do on just a regular basis. It's marked as a day of service. It's a day of remembrance to honor the legacy of Dr. King and honor, his birthday.
Very telling. Yeah, Arizona is, I think it's one of the few states that's mentioned in a Public Enemy song as a racist state. I think they say the whole state is racist. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that it was actually Reagan. I think it was Reagan who signed in, the conservative, anti-union, disgusting, racist Reagan who signed in Martin Luther King Day. But it was struggle. I mean, it was the masses of Black people in struggle, putting their lives on the line
to make it a federal, huh?
Yeah, to get even. We know it's a symbolic gesture. We know that a holiday isn't food in people's stomach. It's not better jobs, but it's dignity. It's a measure of dignity. A symbolic gesture, measure of dignity that was hard won and fought for, where the people in motion and power pushed even a racist to give at least that symbolic change to the people. Nothing. If people want to look at the thumbnail, the enemy just don't gonna give you something. You got to demand it from them.
Yeah, and then, I mean, and the legacy of Dr. King is one. One thing I like to say is I love now you see a lot more where for the right wing he's being placed as this the ideal example of black you know black civil rights movements or black figures, and they use him as like this post of like the example of how all black you know leaders should act, you know what I mean? And they use him a lot. They use his name, they use his legacy as kind of, even you get people like I forget her name. She's his I think she's the niece of Dr. King. Um she's not a Fox contributor. You know what I mean? So it's kind of disgusting that the right wing now are using and taking this opportunity to use Dr. King's legacy as uh, a banner for their, we're not racist. We respect Dr. King, and it's the same people that are there, the David Dukes and people who quote Dr. King on Fox. When Dr. King was alive, they would probably be the same people, calling him an anarchist, a communist. You know what I mean? So it's funny how they've propped him up as the ideal example of black leadership, not understanding that first of all, we're not a monolith. Black people, and for all of my people that are on here now, hear this: we are not a monolith. You know what I mean? We respect Dr. King. We respect all of Dr. King, but even Dr. King's position changed a lot when he got older. You know what I mean? As time went on, Dr. King changed his his belief. You know what I mean? He talked about how as much as he's felt that we have accomplished in the civil rights and all the things that we've gained on the civil rights, that America is a burning house. You know what I mean? And he refers to that as a burning house, and that he feels that he's integrating his people into a burning house. And now that we as black people, oppressed people, have to be the firemen to put out this burning building. You know what I mean? So it's just very interesting how he kind of changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of criticism. Me and you are probably closer politics to Malcolm X or Kwame
Yeah.
Ture, especially compared to early King. And there was a lot of criticism from people that were more radical. People like one of my favorites, Robert F. Williams, who
Yeah.
wanted to use radical self-defense, one of the earliest
Yeah.
advocates, a leader of the NAAC that led an armed chapter. It's interesting.
It's funny because
He migrate to it. What I think is, I think Kwame Ture said it best, that even though he called out King, X called out King, Kwame said, King never attacked any of them. King never went after any of the people that critiqued him. He was
no.
consistent and true in his Christian values. He was not a hypocrite. And then when he told oppressed people to be peaceful, he didn't just tell oppressed people to be peaceful. And when it came time, when the United States Empire was mass murdering people in Vietnam to stop them from their own national liberation and their own destiny, he called out the war in Vietnam, and he called the United States the biggest purveyor of violence in the world. So it's hard not to respect what King stood for and his works.
Yeah, I feel that King, you said something. King being the ever so, um, being the quintessential leader and quintessential diplomat. He, when it came to other black radicals, he understood that speaking out against X, Malcolm, speaking out against Kwame, Kwame started his civil rights, his activist, you know, career under King in the student nonviolent coalition. You know what I mean? He was very active under King. Even after they split and he began to call out King, King understood that, you know, there are people who are not going to necessarily agree with the nonviolent civil disobedience. And that's okay, you know what I mean? And I watched an interview of Coretta, and she talked about it. You know, when Malcolm X died, um, Coretta and Dr. King wrote a letter, a telegram, and sent it to Dr. Betty Shabazz, who is the widow of Malcolm X. Um, Sent you know, basically their well wishes, because they understood how important Malcolm was to the black race. So, you know, I definitely tip my hat off. There's, you know, I disagree a lot with his earlier politics, but he was a gentleman, and he definitely was a leader and a diplomat.
Hmm. Very powerful. We recently were able to have a study on Robert F. Williams, and I actually was able to finally finish his book, Negroes with Guns. And it's really interesting because King is essentially the universal figure that's promoted in U.S. media, even by conservatives and U.S. corporations. King is the leader of the civil rights movement. The "I Have a Dream" speech, which he's made better speeches and more radical speeches
Yeah,
than that.
drum agents for righteousness.
He's essentially seen as the universal figure of not only black rights but human rights as a whole. So as a young man in high school, I was obviously very interested in social justice generally. And who else would you start with than King? And King led me to read about Gandhi. And Gandhi led me to read about Henry David Thoreau. And Henry David Thoreau was a huge influence on the the nonviolent tactics, but mostly not even the idea of a nonviolent tactic, the idea that the law is can be morally wrong, that you can more it is moral to break unjust
And
law
more,
and
yeah,
civil
and
disobedience. And he quoted this from jail, because I mean that's still kind of a concept in our culture that people internalize. And what I think is interesting about Robert F. Williams and his book Negroes with Guns, um, Robert F. Williams did not think that we should limit ourselves to nonviolence. Robert F. Williams, if he did not use armed self defense in North Carolina, he would have been killed by racists if he didn't do it. And he was able to survive and go to Cuba and go to China and then retire um, and live out to be old age as a revolutionary. And what he said in his book is the source of the understanding of civil disobedience. The American philosopher Henry David Thoreau was not a pacifist. Henry David Thoreau was fully in favor of the actions of the man in the picture behind me, John Brown. So he took, some of the preliminary philosophy which generated here in the United States, Henry David Thoreau, who refused to pay his taxes until they stopped fighting the war against Mexico, until they ended slavery, and they put him in prison. And that's kind of where Gandhi and Martin Luther King got this. You can break the law and you can do it morally and you can do it in mass and you can put pressure on the system. But even the guy who came up with the idea of civil disobedience was not a pacifist. And I thought, and
what
that
does
was a
it
good
say?
argument from Robert F. Williams.
Yeah, what do they say? It is moral to break an immoral law.
Yes.
That is one of my favorite quotes. You
Mm.
know, because it's just like, if the law is immoral, then it's moral to break that law. And you know, there were so many iconic figures that, and one thing I can say about Dr. King is he realized as a smart man that he would need other smart people around him. Just some of the leaders that were people like Dr. John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, so he understood that he needed to surround himself. His speechwriter is none other than Dr. Oh, I keep calling people Doctor Henry, Harry Belafonte, who wrote his speeches um, up until his death. You know what I mean? So he understood that not only um, he gave people almost like a different flavor because everyone that surrounded him, and not only in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, but what was the group? Well, I'm trying to think of I can't remember the organization that King actually led, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Um, I'm pretty sure that not everybody that was a part of that organization agreed with King, and some have actually, after King died, and when they started writing books, discussed that a lot of the strategies they disagreed with. A lot of people do not believe, and to this day, I even believe that Dr. King should have never went back to Memphis.
Hmm.
That him going back to Memphis for the second time, is what got him killed. Um, he had led the march there, which is what all he promised, but being a leader sometimes and making those sacrifices and being selfless as Dr. King was. Because let's be honest, his legacy is is a legacy of selflessness and a legacy of having a heart for his people, and having a heart to understand that being in this life, you're going to have to make sacrifices, and sometimes you're going to have to make the ultimate sacrifices. Dr. King's final speech, he said, longevity has its place. It's almost like he knew that when he went back to Memphis that he wasn't going to make it out of Memphis, and sure enough, he was assassinated that following evening. You know what I mean? So I just feel that, we have to give, whether you agree with his politics or disagree with his politics, you have to give the man credit. He did a lot of great things. You know what I mean? I don't agree with his politics, all of them. I don't I do believe that King was a reformist. I believe that he felt that he could work within the system, very similar to people like people like Booker T. Washington. You know what I mean? Reformists, but even those black reformists have a legacy, and that anyone who's willing to not only sacrifice time, he was a young man. Dr. King was 30 something years old when he died. He wasn't an old man. He had kids. He had a life. He could have very much easily been, a writer or a congressman, or, you know what I mean? He could have done something more with his life after the civil rights movement. We will never know the breadth of his legacy because he was cut short. You know what I mean? It was almost like he died before we can see the end. You know what I mean? And a lot of the things, one of the things that I always question is like, Dr. King now, would he be on the side of the people like Black Lives Matter? Because that was a quote thing when BLM first started. All of these right wing conservative mega communist nuts were talking about, Dr. King would never allow that. Dr. King was nonviolent. They love to pull, again, use his legacy to degrade other blacks struggle, the black struggle. They love to put him up there. You know what I mean? But
Mm,
in his day, he was looked at as, a rebel rouser, a coon, a person who, who's anti, what they call it, anti-American. Doctor, what's his name? J. Edgar Hoover did everything in his power to destroy the legacy of Dr. King. Why? Because, again, like I told you earlier, fear of a black, the quote unquote, they say fear of the black Messiah. You know what I mean?
mm,
That's what, and they did, and even after Dr. King was assassinated, that's what they feared. The FBI feared that if another, we can't serve, we as a nation cannot survive another King rising up. You know what I mean? We already put down Malcolm X, we put down King. We can't fear of a rise. We can't survive another Dr. King. You know what I mean? Like America's legacy can't survive if if they were able to create or build up another Dr. King.
mm. Very true.
Zach,
Very
there's two
true.
people here. Zach,
Yeah, I hate to bring it back to Robert F. Williams, but I saw a good clip from him in the '80s where he was talking about how it was because of his armed tactics that he was able to live into his old age. And he talked about it's interesting how they name places after King or they'll name places after X, and both of them died pretty much in their prime.
yeah,
And but Williams was able to live out into his old age. And
hmm
I think there's a bit of a double-edged sword of saying, well, if to hold up revolutionaries that died young, so they
well,
can almost
well,
warn people not
yeah,
to go into that thing. I think it's good they celebrate King, but it was Reagan who signed this into law as Williams states. Maybe you talk
yeah,
about
of
how
course.
Williams.
It's funny because I always say this, like when I was a young radical, a young, getting a young activist, getting involved in social justice and social change. I I obsessed over, you know, dying young because I knew that, you know, we're taught, from history that activists don't live, especially if you are as vocal and in the face of, you know what I mean? Like that is another reason why you don't see a lot of people. You see people try to be the so-called quote unquote leader of the black revolution. You don't see that anymore because we realize that every time we put somebody up there on that pedestal, what happens? They get shot down. So nobody wants to go and be on that level of King or X or Kwame or any of them, Huey or Fred. Every time a black messiah, a black person rises up to lead his people out, he is shot down.
Hmm. I mean,
You know what I
there is
mean?
plenty of examples, but they seem to push the ones that are killed early. Like if we look at Harry Haywood, lived into his old age. Kwame Ture lived into
He
his
did,
old age and
but
continued to
Kwame
work.
lived on it. But just because they lived on their old age didn't. So just because they lived um old age does not mean that their lives
Hmm.
were. H. Rat Brown lived to be old age, but he spent his life in jail. You know what I mean? He's you know what I mean? Momir, old age.
Oh yeah.
Where's he at? In jail. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, they live to be old age, but just because they live to be old age does not mean that their life. I mean, even look at Robert Williams. Where did he die at? When he left, where did he go? He could not live in this country.
He was
He went to
exiled
China.
for like
Yeah, he
12
was
years,
exiled.
but he came back and retired. He came back and retired
Yeah,
in the
but
United
what I mean is he spent a long period of time in
States.
exile. Asada Shakur,
Yeah.
my Shiro, my personal Shiro is got a $2 million bounty on her head and is in
Mm,
exile in Cuba and can never come back to America. You know what I mean? So, and she's an example of a living legacy of a person who not only beat the system, but was able to escape from the plantation and but she, like I said, just because she lives in old age does not mean that their lives are peace and quiet, and you know what I mean, and they, it's
mm.
not like that. It's different for white revolutionaries. They can live long lives and be jailed. Look at what's his name, the guy who the anarchist dude, Roy Bob Ayers. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well,
He's running a $18 million foundation.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, it's different for black leaders than it is white leaders. Just because they
yeah,
live to be old does not mean that their lives are not haunted. Huey P.
mm.
Newton, he got out of jail. What happened? He was
According,
still harassed. He was
yeah,
still harassed by the police. Go ahead.
according to Kwame Ture, Newton was killed by the cops.
Absolutely.
I ain't gonna
No, you don't have
disagree.
to. You don't have to. No, that's fact. We don't
We
say
ain't gonna.
according to. He was murdered by the
Yeah.
police.
Mm.
So
Yes, bro.
exactly, Eldridge Cleaver, he wind up becoming a complete reformist, and
Mm.
that's the only way. If you look at a lot of these civil rights leaders, a lot of them, they're nothing like they were when they were younger. You understand
Mm.
what I'm saying? It was
I don't.
like they
Yeah. I think that the
go
point I was getting to Williams is you can stand up for yourself, defend
and
yourself,
live.
work as a revolutionary. Do it in a smart way. I'm not going to say you're going to take risks, but you can do it and live,
Well,
and
I'm
you
just
can
saying
do it
because
and live until
it's different for a black
not.
leader.
Yeah. Mm. I think it's definitely more dangerous. There's definitely more hate and scrutiny and a double standard put on oppressed people. I'd like to see more white folks step up and be willing to take more risks.
Well, not when you got people
Um,
like mega
mm,
communists. Yeah, it's that time of the
because
show.
I mean, there's no ending and yeah, there is no ending class exploitation, other forms of exploitation without addressing national oppression. National oppression, the super exploitation of black and brown people, reinforces class exploitation. It enables the enemy to maintain this system. The only way out
Well, when you
for
got
white workers
when
is
you
to support black liberation and brown liberation struggles.
when you have people like Justin, when you got people like Jackson Hinkle, yeah, I'm gonna call him out. It's that time of the show, to call some fucking people out. Mega communism is not a real thing and can never. You at this point, you can no longer call yourself a communist and support Donald Trump. Yes, I'm talking to you,
Mm,
Jackson Hinkle. I'm talking to all your crazy, dumb, stupid, um, mega communists are who are pushing that dumb narrative that Trump is is uh is some kind of communist superhero. You know what I mean? And that
mm.
his messaging is a messaging of working class and oppressed people. It's not true. You know what I mean? It's stupid. But
I
again,
agree.
it's white liberals and white leftists make it unsafe for black people and oppressed people and people of color to be in these spaces. Again, I always tell you this, that there's a reason why blacks radicals tend to stay to themselves and into their own circles, and this is why people like Jackson Hinkle, who not he he puts people on pedestal like Nick Fuentes and Alex Jones. You know what I mean? Two of the most biggest grifters to ever exist. You know what I mean? Both of them are grifters. You know what I mean? We're unsafe, and the fact is that they don't understand that the only way to end all oppression is to address the working class oppression that is done by people who are oppressed. I said oppressed a lot.
I think we should be saying oppressed. I mean, Stalin, who, basically the one who put Marxism, Leninism into practice, came up and wrote the book on national oppression, which is the material reality, which racism is only a symptom of. There was a really good quote by Robert F. Williams that the Afro-American revolutionaries, as he puts it, are opposed to white supremacists, whether they use the language of Marxism-Leninism or they use the fake Christianity of the Ku Klux Klan. There is no
of course, absolutely.
White supremacy and Marxist language or the Klan language is the same white supremacy, and it's the same tool for empire to keep.
Didn't I say that to you before? I swear. Didn't I say that to you? I think we had a conversation, and I said that exact same thing, that all white supremacy. We were having a discussion about another confused communist. I call him a keyboard communist, vulgar Marxist. We were talking about him, and yeah, I'm gonna call names because I'm not scared. Come at me, bro. I'm not scared of trolls at all. How sometimes, even if he did not, and I'm not going to say that vulgar Marxist is a white supremacist. I'm not going to say that because I don't know the brother. You know what I mean? But what I'm going to say is that by using certain language and certain behaviors, that is a red flag for me. You know what I mean? And as someone who has been doing this for as long as I have, 2 decades plus, there are certain things that I see and that I look at, and patterns that once I see it in you, I'm automatically going to assume that you swing that kind of way. You know what I mean? Because I just feel that you cannot, there's no way that you can tell me that that the Black oppression and the oppression of oppressed people and working class people isn't important. You know what I mean? Or isn't even, you know what I mean? Like the national question isn't a big deal. Like you can't tell me that. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's funny because the capitalists think it's a big deal. Why are the Democrats always grifting as if they actually support oppressed people? It's because it is a big question, and they know if they can look like the better of the two parties, they can get masses of people to support them. So they recognize it, they study it in their universities, and they try to manipulate it for their interests. Why wouldn't communists understand this? And we have understood. Haywood, who was a Bolshevik, who was a member of the central, one of the central committees in the Soviet Union, applied the national question to the Black Belt South. And then Stalin told the white communists to organize Black workers. And when they did, both in the sharecroppers unity drives, and back in the 20s, there was 20% of coal miners were Black. They had the biggest victories when the Communist Party of the United States supported Black liberation and made it clear to Black workers that they fully supported their rights. We had the greatest unity and the greatest power. And it wasn't until the weak revisionists gave up on the national question, deserted organizing in the South, that we lost an effective communist.
No, Hunt, say it, because you're about to say it. They abandoned Black people and Black liberation.
Yes. That is what
Point
the
blank
revisionists
period.
did. That's what
And
the
it's
communists
funny that
did.
that and look at
Go
us
ahead.
now. Look at us now, and we're still paying the price for it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there are a
Yes.
few communist organizations that will, you know, put banners up and Black Lives Matter this but what are they doing? You know what I mean? Um, Here in Philadelphia, there's a book, and I tell you about this book all the time. Um, Here in Philadelphia, when the CPUSA, Communist Party of the United States, was at its prime during the 40s and 50s,
Mm.
around the time FDR was the FDR elections, um, one of the things they would do if you lost your job as an oppressed working class person, not black or white or brown or whatever, um, the CPUSA would make sure that you had food. They made sure that you had clothes. They made sure that your housing was paid for. You know what I mean? Because those are three essentials that, as a working class person, if you want to organize, those are the three things. Even to this day, those are, if you look at the Panther Party's 10-point program: food, clothes, shelter. Those are the three top key issues for all oppressed people. How, food, clothing, and sheltering. If you are not in the community, if you are not in your community of providing those three things, then you cannot call yourself a communist. It's very interesting that, me and you had this discussion earlier on today when I said, a lot of these communists, I don't know them because I'm too busy in my community. I don't know Jackson Hinkle. I never knew a lot of these people. I didn't even know what mega communism is until I got online. You know what I mean? Because I'm too
Mm.
busy in my real life, in my real existence, out and about among the community that I work and I live in. I'm too busy, feeding my people, clothing my people, educating the oppressed people in my city and in the surrounding areas. I don't have time. A lot of the problem is with these online communities. A lot of these people that are just online, they don't understand that in order for you to be um not even a real communist, uh for you to be able to see communism in action, you have to put work in. You know what I mean? It's more than
Mm.
just protesting. It's more than just going to Palestinian protests. It's more than just like we have food drives here. We do clothing drives. Like I'm very being active in the community, because those are, if you want to help oppressed people, you have to be in amongst the people, not just on Twitter bantering about Marxist Leninist theories,
Mm.
which is
Very
why
powerful.
I refer to them as keyboard comrades.
Mm. Yeah, a lot of people. I mean, a lot of folks don't know that before the Panthers, we actually had the opportunity. We studied the 10-point program on this channel. Folks can go back, and we had a sister from Texas join us, and a brother, Chicano brother, from Colorado, I believe, join us in that. And what I didn't know when I studied that document is Robert F. Williams was in contact with the Koreans, the communists in Korea, long before the Panthers were. And he also had a 10-point program for Monroe. And he got that tradition from the Korean communists. So a lot of these people who like to say that communism is foreign to the black struggle in the United States, or even that communism is foreign in America, it's not. Like, American radicals have always learned from communists, and there has been large communist movements in the United States. I think they were brutally suppressed in the 50s, um, and then COINTELPRO, mostly black revolutionaries who were leading the struggle, not only back then, but especially in the 60s and 70s, were brutally suppressed. And then a lot of people were bought off. And we can look at some of the people that worked with King that became even more reformist. Why King became more revolutionary and was ultimately killed. There was other people who sold out. And now we're coming up on a new period where, we're in my lifetime, we face 3 economic crises. Less people can buy houses. The price of food is incredibly high. People can't afford to eat. And people are looking around and they can no longer believe the lies of the system. And I think we got to look back at the old left, at the new left, at the best of the civil rights movement, the best of the Black Power movement, and think about what are we going to do today to get free from capitalism, to get free from national liberation. We're reaching the end of the program. I think that's going to do it for my concluding remarks. Brother Musa, if you could leave the folks today with one thought to keep them going, push them forward, what would that be, brother? You're still muted. Are you still with us?
Oh, hey, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go
So
ahead.
I was gonna read a little bit of the 10-point program for the party, but we could do that another time. For me, my closing remark would be get offline, get off Twitter, and go and do something in an oppressed community. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about how much of a communist you are. Yeah, I'm talking to the people who are online or listening who are what I call keyboard communists. Get offline and go into those oppressed communities. Talk to the oppressed people. Ask them about what they need. How can you as a person can help them? That's it. And if you're not doing that, then stop calling yourself a communist. Because communism is more than just theory. It's action.
Very powerful, brother. I want to wish everyone a very happy, but also a fighting Martin Luther King Day. I want to second that notion to get out in the masses and build and serve the people. If you want to raise your fist, repeat after me. All power to the people.
All power to people. Who started that?
I just started doing I really love
No,
that.
I'm saying who started it though. There's another group of people that I know.
Panther slogan. That's a Panther slogan, and I've loved it since I was a kid. I had a leather jacket, and I wrote it on the back of my jacket when I was organizing the unemployed in Greensboro when I helped build the coalition.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.